Welcome to another episode of the podcast for the Gray Stage. I'm Dan Hennon. We're joined here with Greg Fernandez Jr., the author of the book, The Gray Stage. Welcome, Greg.
Thank you, Dan. Always glad to be here.
Well, it's interesting. We've done this now once a month, going through your book. We're on year 3, Greg. This is episode number 25. We've done one per month for the last two years, and now we find ourselves on chapter 12. We've completed 11 chapters of your book by going through and reading it and having dialogue. Very interesting. Now we're on chapter 12. It's called The Sister of Komel. And we get into Sidra today. And for those of you following along in the book, it's page 105 in the soft copy of the book. So we'll start off with that. And what I'll do, Greg, is read the first couple of paragraphs and then we could chat about it.
Sure. Sounds good.
An interesting, once again, the book here, Gray Stage, by Greg Fernandez Jr., talking about the Crowley case in Apple Valley, Minnesota. We're starting off first with the section called The Presence. The Presence. We're not talking gifts here. We're talking presence with the E-N-C-E. Not the gifts at the front stoop, but presence. Because we get into some paranormal activity in this chapter. All this happens before the killings and whatnot. But I'll go ahead and get us started here. In 2011, Komel's sister Sidra stayed overnight at David and Komel's apartment. Now, they were living in Minneapolis in an apartment. They weren't in their Apple Valley home just yet because I think they moved in to that home in December of 2013. So this is all prior to that. They were in an apartment. Sidra slept in Ranya's room. In the middle of the night, Sidra woke up when she heard Ranya crying and screaming. Whatever it was that Ranya saw in her bedroom that night, Sidra saw it too. Up until that point, Sidra did not believe paranormal activity was real. That changed when Sidra saw a presence standing by the door. She said, quote, "So I figured it was David," end quote. Sidra explained to me. And I called his name, she says, but it didn't move. It just stood there. I freaked out, Sidra continued, and ran out the door and went to their room, and I saw David on the ground praying. He said he felt the energy was off that night. He told us to go in the room, and he chanted some stuff from the Bible. And some of Ranya's toys went flying and hit the walls. So this is very interesting, Greg. Number one, we get that Sidra does not believe in paranormal activity, but now she does after this episode. She said she saw a presence. She believes it was whatever Ranya saw and was crying as well. Now Ranya would have been, boy, two years old here?
Yeah, because she was born in what, 2009, August of 2009. So yeah,
so
about 2
very,
years.
very young. And they were living in an apartment. She saw a presence. And then David responded with, yeah, the energy was off that night. So he was not surprised by it, evidently. And he was on the floor praying. And I take that as, I'm envisioning he was probably on his knees by the bed or something praying. Is that what you took from it? Or did she say something else about being on the floor?
Yeah, that was pretty much what I took. I don't know if he was in the room, the living room or somewhere. I wasn't really sure exactly where David was, but yeah, that he was on the ground praying. And I was even wondering if that's what caused things to kind of move. Like once he started praying, and why was he praying? He didn't know that he didn't see the presence, as far as we know. So how did he know what happened with Sidra? So some of the time, because she was just very brief about telling me all of this stuff. And this was all supposed to be included in a gray state. So this was some of the stuff that was taken out, according to what Sidra said. This was taken out of that film. So that would have been curious to see that in the film too.
Now, I think there's two things here. One is Eric Nelson in the film was going to use this as another reason that things were happening, paranormals act, this was just crazy things happening to the couple.
Right.
In other words, making them almost crazy. And so that was to help sell that. But we found out later that this has nothing to do with the murders or the killings, because we've got the actual evidence with the bullets and whatnot that took place. so this is just background information that helps the case and the story. Sidra was living with her parents in Hewitt, Texas. So she was up to Minnesota to visit and then stayed in the bedroom with her, but with Rania. But very interesting. Now, when things are flying off the walls and toys were flying off the walls, I'm assuming they were on the cupboard or on a shelf or something and flying around. That's not something easily made up or imagined. In my belief, that was real paranormal activity that took place in that room that night, regardless of what happened. If people believe it or not, that was a paranormal event, and very strange. Now, we know also that David was brought up and was Christian and believed in the Bible and whatnot, even though later we find out about all the Muslim angle and everything else. But he was praying, and then it started acting weird. So that all makes sense to me as far as events that could potentially take place. It's not out of the realm of possibility.
Right. Yeah,
But
it's pretty
it did-
interesting that it all happened in 2011 too. I had thought for some reason 2013. So this is like what, 1 year, 2 years after David is out of service too.
He's
So
out of the service. They're married. They've got the baby, and they're living in an apartment in Minneapolis, and this stuff was happening. So who knows? But what surprises me here is the fact that David said that the energy seemed off. So it also seemed to me like he was not surprised at this. He was not shocked. He started chanting some things. That's maybe something that he's done in the past, and maybe it's something that he's dealt with or encountered, that he seemed to know what to do. So
yeah, I would have been freaked out. I've never seen anything like that, never experienced anything like that. So they all seem very calm. And even when David talks about some of that stuff in his journal, just very calm. Even when Komel, except for the one time where she's kind of, a little bit freaking out or whatever. But most of the time, in the two of the three clips that we have seen of Komel talking about this stuff, she seems pretty calm too. It doesn't seem like this is the first, like you said, it doesn't seem like it's the first time this has happened. They kind of know what to do, and it's something that they just kind of dealt with.
yeah, it would be nice to know more of the background of that, but it's neither here nor there at the same time. But it's important to put in the book because it was put in the movie, and then later when the Alam family found out how it was being used and portrayed to make Komel look crazy, and then they did not agree to go into that in the film and not to be part of it, they had to go back and cut this section out. Eric Nelson, that is.
Right.
And then they filled it in with something else, but this was evidently supposed to be part of the film. Interesting. Now it says, further on, it says, the Crowley family then moved across the hall to see if the presence would follow them there.
Mm.
Now, my only question there is does that mean that they moved and signed a new lease in the apartment building and got a new room and a new key and moved next door and actually lived in a different room, a different unit of that apartment? I guess that's what it's saying, but it'd be nice to get information on that too, because with presence and paranormal activity, mainly it's either in a building or in a room, and it does not follow. It does not follow you. So they knew once again right away to, hey, let's move and see if it follows us. And so they moved.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I haven't read this in a while, obviously, but yeah, to see if it followed them there. So was this like the first incident that they had kind of had, or had they gotten to the point where they're like, you know what, we need to get out of this place and see if it follows us here, follows us to some other place. So that's pretty interesting that they actually moved across the hall. I would have moved out of the state or something, but
If something like that happened, yes. And for the most part, there is maybe, I don't know if you call them, three types of paranormal things that may come into your house or home. Someone just acting nefarious, doing strange things. And then you may get a dark entity or something that's negative, evil almost. It sounds like almost like what this was. Or it may have just been a spirit, if you will, waiting to cross over. I don't know how you put it, but sometimes there's just things like that that go on in a house that are just doing strange things.
Mm.
This seemed like more evil or bad, malevolent, kind of an entity. So they wanted to leave and move. So that all makes sense. Now, Sidra said that she wasn't sure if it followed David and Komel, but she did recall what her sister told her the last time they saw each other in Texas. According to Sidra, Komel was now hearing whispers while she slept. Now, that could also be true. That could also be, I can't imagine that'd be made up. But if she told her sister about it, I would have to believe that Komel thought it was real or legit. And this was after they moved, and she told her this in Texas. So there were things going on. It seemed like that these two, as a young couple with a young child, were dealing with these extra types of extracurricular events that would be hard on any young family.
Sure.
It's hard enough getting through with having a young baby and a young parent. So, but dealing with this kind of stuff, wow.
And the last time they would have met in Texas, that would have been 2014, right? That would have been June or
May or June of, think of the last year. So, but she says, quote, she would be sleeping, Sidra said of Komel. Some things would whisper in her ear and tell her stuff like leave David or random things. And she would wake up angry at him, end quote. Now, this is very interesting. This very well could be true. Sidra telling the narrative here might be suspect when she adds in the phrase telling her to leave David and types of those things. These are pointing David as a bad guy once again. And we have to take a step back and say, is this Sidra saying this to lead us down that path? Or were things really being whispered and then she just added that up, added that in? Or was it legit? We don't know, because once again, you talked to her after 2016 or 2017, I believe, to get this information. So very strange. So they had the presence in the apartment, whispers in the ear when she was sleeping. Very strange. We also know that there was pot, marijuana being used, recreational or not, hallucinogens later in the house, whether it's mushrooms or whatever. So I'm just trying to think of how the others will perceive this when they hear this chapter. Will they dump it into the same bucket as these guys were drug users and hallucinating all the time, and they just couldn't differentiate between real and fiction?
Right.
That may be an answer they say, but it could certainly be true. Now, you go on to write at the bottom of page 105, that made me curious about the red man, quote, that was mentioned in an article related to the documentary A Gray State by Eric Nelson. According to Sidra, Eric Nelson's portrayal of the red man in A Gray State was inaccurate. Red man was just something they would scare Rania with when she wouldn't listen, Sidra said. It's just a little red man that comes up when a movie starts, end quote. So is this, when she's saying, is this when a movie would start, like a Disney movie or a Pixar movie or something? Did we ever find out what the red man was at the beginning of that movie?
Yeah, and I'll share that here too, for people that are watching this. So it's, if you look up Bad Robot Studios,
Yep.
and you'll see at the very beginning there's a quote unquote red man, I guess.
Okay, and that was common in the series, the television series Lost was always, before each episode was always the bad robot. They would say bad robot.
Interesting.
And the little red man would come up. So that was what they were referring to, as the introduction of that production company, essentially.
Correct.
That was their logo.
And somehow that scared Rania. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I guess, yeah, that's odd.
And it may have been, we don't get the answer here, but it could have been something that was a joke meant to scare her as a joke, or meant to scare her seriously. I can't imagine them doing that to scare her seriously, but when she wouldn't listen. But it may have been one of those things that a parent would just say to get the child to listen. But what you were inferring was perhaps maybe this had something to do with the paranormal activities in the house, right?
Correct. At that time, yeah, at that time, I definitely thought that, okay, there's a red man. When I think of a red man, and I've heard other versions of a red man, it's a red person, a bloody person. So when they talk about the red man, that's what I was thinking. Oh, this guy covered in blood or something like that. Like, what the heck is going on? Like, why would you tell a kid that or anything? But
Yes.
this seems to be a little bit different. It's a robot. It's basically a robot who is red, I guess. But so that's all that I knew. I've never seen the TV show Lost. So when they show that in Lost, they actually the red man said or the red robot says something. The bad robot talks
I don't know if
to,
it
or
says it, but the voiceover in the background says
interesting.
it in a
Okay.
child's voice. It says "bad robot."
That's a little creepy to me. Okay, I
So
didn't know
that's
that.
probably all that they were talking about there.
Yeah.
And we hear from Sidra that there was a presence in the doorway. She didn't say the color, but just said a presence. And I'd like to go back to one other thing. I think Sidra assumed when Rania woke up crying and screaming that Rania was seeing this presence. And perhaps she was. Now, we don't know what Rania was seeing or experiencing. Sidra saw it, and therefore she assumed that's what she was crying from. Is that accurate to say
Yeah,
that she saw
that's
it, that she assumed? Okay.
that's what I thought. I mean, that's pretty much the way that I took it too. Is
Okay.
that the reason why Sidra woke up is because Rania saw this thing first and started screaming.
That is
So
super creepy.
it really is, and it's like, well, where was David? Where was the father and the mother? They don't come into the room, so it makes me think, how quickly did all of this happen?
Correct.
And then all of a sudden, David is praying instead of going to comfort the screaming daughter. And maybe it's because they knew Sidra was there. Maybe it's because I could speculate and
I see.
speculate all day.
I
I don't
see.
know, but
But you're right. By the time she went into the bedroom, he was already on the floor praying,
right.
knowing something was up. But that is, I guess, creepy. But anyway, so we got the red man is what they use, is what they say to scare her. We don't know if it relates to anything like this, but that was the beginning of that production company's before our show started that they produced.
Yeah, so once I learned that, I was like, okay, I don't really think that I don't really think there's anything between those two. Again, I'm just speculating here, but I thought that it was relevant to put into this book, to kind of as far as the timeline. Like if this would have happened in 2014, 2013, I probably would have put this later in this chapter because this
Gotcha.
happened earlier. That's the reason why I put it at the beginning, not to try to make anyone seem, to try to influence anybody. But I also thought this was something very relevant from what Sidra was saying. And whether people want to believe it or whether they don't, whether they take it seriously or whether they don't, I thought that it was very relevant to put into this book. And I did struggle with that too. What should I put it in? My journalistic side was telling me yes. And then, other parts were saying no, because it's not really relevant. And it may, some, like you said, some people may take it and think, oh, well, here's more proof that David and his wife were crazy and dealing in spiritual stuff, that they dabbling in things that they shouldn't have been doing, which I still kind of am open towards. That maybe they were opening doors that they should not have open.
Correct. When it gets to the occult and things like that, we do have that symbol, the Bohemian Grove
It's true.
item, in David's closet. Whether he got that as a gift or whether he bought that and thought it was cool or was using it as a movie prop, we don't know. But it's still one of those things that you probably wouldn't be in possession of in the first place.
Right.
And he did study all different religions, including the
true.
occult and Satanism and everything. So he was well versed in all of those things, although it's safe to say that he was a Christian, but he was involved in learning because of his IQ level. He had a real depth of learning all of these things, and by accident could have tripped some of these things open, because that 2011 apartment is where the presence was. We knew that there was hallucinations in the Apple Valley home. Was it the same? I can't believe it would be the same, because that means it would have followed them. But were they just open to having spiritual type of things, paranormal things happen where they were, or after moving? Or was Komel, were they experimenting with drugs, mind-altering things, and these things were popping up? Who knows? But it's strange, and I think it's good to have in the book the 2011 activity, along with moving into 2013 into the new house. And then they had that episode on Halloween night or end of October when she was seeing the hallucinations and woke up from the rapture. sort of thing, and he started filming it. So
That's right.
things were going on in their relationship, regardless of where they lived, where they moved, and what they did. Things were happening. So I think it's all relevant still. And the daughter was exposed to it. This is a 2-year-old daughter, allegedly, potentially seeing this presence in the doorway back in 2011. Now, it ties into what you have next here because it does tie into the case. Rania's crying, Greg writes here, is reminded me of a very curious incident in October of 2014. A supplemental report by Detective Jim Gummert explained that Rania came to school sometime during the school day, became very upset and tried to hide in a classroom, and the teacher found her and she found her cowering in a corner and crying and saying that she was afraid, so much so that she could not calm down enough and had to be sent to the office to calm down. That was the only incident that stood out to the school staff, according to Detective Gummert.
And that's another thing that was kind of like, is it tied? Is it not tied? But just looking for, at this point, I'm looking for anything that's kind of, and remember, I didn't have the journal. We didn't have the journal then, or else I probably could have included some of the stuff that was in that journal too. But at this point, I'm looking for anything weird, anything that kind of stood out. And the fact that this is documented, this is happening at school. I mean, these are all things that Rania is tied to. Everything that happens, even in Eric Nelson's film, Rania is always there. It's I haven't heard of any of these supernatural, spiritual, paranormal stuff, whatever, where Rania is not involved. So it made me wonder, is this thing following her? Now, as like you just
trying attached itself to her
for some reason, because as a 2-year-old, I mean, we know about how children can see angels. It seems like, from my research, from my personal, not my personal, but from my family's experience, the younger they are, they're more apt to see angels, and maybe to see other things too, to see the opposite of the angels, right? Demons, basically. So it made me wonder about these things. And this incident really stuck out to me when we first had these 94 pages of police reports. That's where this comes from. It really stuck out to me. Why would Rania be freaking out here? What was going on? This was in October. It's not really sure exactly when, so it doesn't line up with what was happening with Komel in October. It's a strange thing to really happen, but and it's never really followed up on. Obviously, I mean, it's not relevant to Detective Gummert. It's not relevant to his case, really. He notes it, but he doesn't really make anything out of it after that. He's just putting it down there. And if this is the only thing that has happened, what is so special about October 2014? And then when we got the stuff in the journal and everything, you can see that this wasn't the only thing that was happening as far as in the possible paranormal realm that was happening in 2014. I don't know if it's tied. I just thought that it was kind of relevant, and I figured I want to put this in there for people that may know about that stuff, and maybe they have some other views on it, some other comments on it. And
I do recall when this first came out, there were those suspecting that a child would only act that way if there was abuse or neglect or something at home. And I think they were trying to throw David and Komel under the bus at that point too, by saying something that would have startled the daughter, Rania, that much. There must be something going on behind closed doors. Was there abuse? Was there something? And then it was like, I think about a year later, where there was speculation that the brother, Dan Jr., was possibly abusing or molesting little Rania. And then we threw that out when we did the timeline, where whatever happened with David and Dan Jr. happened in August. Around the birthday party time, they cut ties, and the relationship was strained after that. And so this would have nothing to do with Dan Jr., but we did think at one time that there perhaps could have been something going on within the family there. But all we know is that something very, very serious took place in August between Dan and David, the two brothers, that severed their relationship. Right. And so this took place in October. So there was no no evidence of any kind of abuse in the house. Dan was out of the picture, the brother. We don't know what else was going on. But if it was perhaps non-paranormal related and something related to abuse or something, there was really nothing going else on that at that time frame. You bring in the paranormal, and Komel has the rapture in October, the last week of October, I believe, and who knows if this was tied or not. We did try at one point to get in contact with the Montessori school where Rania went to school there at the preschool, and they were hesitant on contacting them or doing anything with them. They didn't want to have any, but now here we are 7 years later, and I think, to reiterate, if anyone, either the director there or the teachers, would like to reach out and contact us to tell us more, it would be more on the lines of the things that we're interested in. Was this episode, for instance, did Rania say anything? Was she just scared and crying, or was any words used or images that she saw that tripped her off? Because we have a whole history of the Montessori school where they had only positive things to say about Rania. Good student, got along well with others. The other students, the classmates liked her. The teachers liked her. She was smart, gifted, and everything we have from the Montessori school for preschool was very positive about Rania. This one thing stood out, and because it was so wild, I'll say, it's really why it stood out.
Yeah.
And then you bring it into the book here because of the timing. This is October, and whether it's connected or not, it's food for thought. As far as what could have happened or what it related to. But it'd be nice if we can get someone from that Montessori to come forward and reach out either by a instant messenger, email, text, something for the show or something like that. This is the kind of things we're looking for. We're not trying to point the finger at the Montessori for doing something wrong. It's to get a little more background on some of these instances. That's it, in a good way.
Right. Right. And I think one of the things that really stood out to me here is that she was hiding. She was hiding.
Yeah.
So it goes back to the first thing where she wakes up crying, and Sidra sees this presence. And I was wondering, okay, did Rania see this presence in her school? Because if she saw something in the school, then obviously this, whatever it is following her. It's
Now,
completely.
we don't know if this took place like first thing in the morning. Sometimes if a child has a bad experience right before school or getting ready, they're kind of in a foul mood to begin the day with.
Sure.
And maybe that could have tripped something. But if this was 1 PM or 2
Which is
o'clock,
what it sounds like. That's what it sounds
sounds
like.
like it was just out of the blue in the afternoon. It
Right.
had nothing to do with anything. And she was having a successful day leading up to this. And then something sparked it. And that would be, if it was paranormal, could very well be the deal. Now, when she saw the presence that Sidra mentioned, that was 2011.
Right.
This is 2014. So it's, once again, food for thought. Would it be the same type of thing or something similar or something like it from 3 years earlier? And if so, would a 2-year-old baby at the time, toddler, even have a memory of that?
That's a good
At
question.
the age of 5, now who knows? And we know we've got those out there with those backgrounds listening to these kind of episodes, and we can get someone maybe to comment or something. Would they even remember a thing like that if it was once? Now, maybe there's recurring things over and over that we don't know about, but boy, something sure sparked her in that classroom, enough so that she went and hid.
Right.
That's not just another boy or girl picking on her or being a bully in the classroom. That wouldn't draw that kind of spark of response like that. She kind of flipped out.
Yeah, I mean, from my view, like I was thinking, you would have to see something that would make you want to go and hide here. I don't know how people, have tied that to David being abusive or Komel being abusive or anything like that. It's like, that doesn't make any sense. I never thought that made sense. The paranormal, obviously, when I read, when I learned more about it, it's like, that's the only thing that really makes sense, unfortunately. So I had to,
Well, it
I
would
had
be
to look at it.
interesting, once again, if we heard from a teacher or the particular teacher that handled the situation or the director of the school about that incident.
Yeah.
they may not have known about the previous paranormal activities that the Crowley family was going through. And maybe that would make sense more for them, because I am sure it freaked out the teacher themselves
Good point.
by getting this kind of to something to elicit a response like this to a young 5-year-old girl. I bet it had an impact on the teacher itself, wondering what on earth could be going on. And maybe they don't know the experience of the paranormal, but it's something to consider nonetheless. Now, the last sentence, the last one here, paragraph, it goes on to say, sometime after the deaths of David, Komel, and Rania, Sidra was inside the house where the killings happened. When we visited the house, said Sidra, we heard Rani's laughs in there, end quote. And that's how the section here ends. Now that, I don't have a personal problem with that either. I am quite sure that they did or would hear things like that. This is a big traumatic event. I wouldn't be surprised if Sidra did hear that. I'm sure she's not making it up. Is her mind playing tricks on her? Possibly. Did she hear laughs? Possibly. Or is more of that still lingering around? Who knows?
Yeah. And there's my timer going off there. But I do know, and this has come up many times, people have asked me this, because you were in the house. You have helped bring several mediums into the house. And one of the questions that I wanted to know was, did they hear anything? Because it wasn't just Sidra, it was other, the Gray State goons also saying, oh yeah, they heard something too. The fact that Sidra did it, that she heard it, was a little more credible, a lot more credible than some of these other people that have said kind of the same thing, where they hear children laughing and stuff like that. But with the mediums that you've spoken to or anything, did they report anything like that? Or can you tell us a little bit about what they also
just
reported?
to summarize quick, I went in there one time with the medium, just to go through the house when it was open for sale with the real estate agent. And the gal that I went through with noticed no paranormal, no spiritual, nothing that heightened her senses, nothing dark in the house. And then another person said too, they got maybe some feelings of something, but nothing that really sparked their interest as far as an entity or something evil or demonic living in that home. Now that's, leave that for what it's worth, but we did go through after it was cleaned up and redone and on the market for sale. So they didn't find anything. And I started putting a lot of this paranormal stuff to rest after that happened.
Yeah.
While at the same time, I do believe that those types of things exist. And I can't believe Komel was making it up, or Sidra with toys flying off the wall. I believe that is probably what happened. But that was at the apartment. Who knows if they were hallucinating or whatnot, but I don't know. We know that the killings themselves, as far as the evidence that was portrayed, had nothing to do with paranormal itself. So we can, I think, safely rule that out. But it's interesting enough with the number of occurrences of strange things that happen. That's very important for the backstory for those following this case and those reading the book, that it does come into play in their lives.
Yeah. And then last thing, I guess, before we wrap this one up, I still get a lot of questions, a lot of people asking about those videos that you do have where we talked about the whole mediums. We did at least 2, I think. Do you have those backed up anywhere? I've looked in some of my replays. I may have.
I've got all of my videos on the Crowley case were on YouTube and backed up. And when YouTube took down my channel last a year ago or something, they took down everything and deleted everything and removed my content, my channel, everything. It's all gone. Now I've got a couple of hard drives in my possession that I backed everything up on, but I have not gone through and started reloading those things back up onto my Rumble account.
Okay.
Which I want to do someday, but I've got a series of a handful of other investigations that are all commingled in there. And I do need to re-upload those.
Okay.
But those are saved. They are backed up. We do have those, but they're not available on the internet right now.
Okay, well that's good to know that someday they will be, because I still get many questions about those videos. They want, hey, do you have Dan's video about the whole mediums? And I've looked and I was like, man, I don't know. They could be in a replay somewhere, but I don't have them backed up
What I'd like
myself.
to do on my website, uglytruth.info, under the David Crowley topic,
Mhm.
is a list of all the videos that we've done. If you click those links there, they're all dead links now, but I'd like to re-upload those onto my Rumble account and then just fix the link and then have an announcement saying they're all ready to go one day. Right now, that's not the case, but I do have to organize those and upload those, but I do have them backed up.
Excellent. Can you tell people where they can find you on Rumble?
It's let's see. I think it's just Dan Hennon at Rumble, DM Hennon at Twitter, and my website, uglytruth.info, and Facebook under Dan Hennon. But YouTube is down. It is gone. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't a suspension. It has been removed. So none of those, you're going to go to dead links on all those YouTube things, but I'll be putting those up on Rumble here, hopefully under a replay or when you group all these videos together under a playlist.
Mhm.
I'd like to put those all under a playlist for this Crowley case in particular and get those up there.
Awesome. Yeah, I've kind of made my venture into Rumble, Getter, things like that. So I'm kind of looking at other things. I think Rumble is the best alternative, and I haven't been censored there yet. So good
Yes,
to go.
that's, I think, the way to go. But I'll have an announcement when those are all up and ready to go. Probably, hopefully, this spring or the summer, but those will all be back up online.
Awesome. Thank you, brother. What about your podcast that we never talk about? You still doing that?
The podcast, the weekly podcast.
Yeah, the weekly podcast. We never talk about that. I think we should a little bit here.
Yeah, I do a weekly radio show on Eternal Affairs Media, EA Truth Media, and it's a weekly current events podcast found on Podbean. Under you can do a search for hashtag Eternal Affairs Media or hashtag EA Truth Radio, and I do a 30-minute podcast summarizing a summary of the week's events in the geopolitical realm of things. Politics, worldwide updates, coronavirus, things that are happening. And we go over things that are in the news that shouldn't be, as far as the distraction. But I like to focus on the things that aren't in the news, but should be. That are very big, very important news, but they're not, of course, on the mainstream media. And so the typical person in the public isn't aware that these things are going on. So we cover things like that. But it's a 30-minute podcast found on eternalaffairsmedia.com.
Yeah, which I found great. I work Monday through Friday, so it's nice to just have that one where I can just kind of look at, and you pretty much cover everything that I would want to research, would want to kind of get a quick update, and you make it so easy that it's like, okay, if I want to look at further things, I can go and research that. But it's just a great breakdown of different things. There's so much happening right now.
It's usually 15 to 20 bullet points per week of things that are going on, and I think the general public hears about maybe 5 of them.
Right.
And so it's and they're all archived out there also to go back and listen to. And that's also a free subscription as well. You can subscribe to that, but it's free. You don't have to pay for that service.
Awesome, brother. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
All right. Have a good day. I've got nothing more here for you, Greg.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. And we'll come back next month and we'll go through the next section here. Guilty as charged.
Awesome. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, brother.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Ross from Planet X Filmworks channel on YouTube and the Zodiac Files True Crime series. Check it out, and shout out to Greg and the Gray Stage channel. Their content is amazing.
Are you interested Interested in the paranormal? Murder mysteries, cryptocurrency, and thought-provoking interviews? Then check out Crypt Rick's I've Been Thinking on YouTube, or every Monday night at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Studio A at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. Welcome to the Crypt.
Minnesota filmmaker and United States Army veteran David Crowley was accused of murdering his wife and daughter before taking his own life in December of 2014. The Apple Valley Police Department suspects the bodies were inside the Minnesota home for 3 weeks after they were found by neighbors on January 17, 2015. Within 24 hours of finding the bodies, authorities assumed this was a double murder-suicide. The culprit was deceased, and the public was not in any danger. Initially, authorities did not see a bullet hole in the living room ceiling or a bullet in the living room carpet. These were two of the most important items in the case, as they were tied to David Crowley and his daughter. It was only after investigators were told of their existence that they returned to the crime scene on 2 separate occasions and retrieved 2 spent rounds. What did authorities find in the Crowley house that proved David Crowley murdered his wife and daughter and then killed himself? Without a motive and with the absence of guilt, the case was closed with the status of exceptionally cleared. If David is truly guilty of this crime, then authorities should be forced to prove their theory. The gray stage exists solely because of the official conclusion as stated on page 92 of the Apple Valley Police Reports PDF. With the conclusion of the review of digital devices, Detective Brian Bone reported on October 7, 2015, there is no other information available for further investigation. Throughout this investigation, the AVPD has not discovered any information or evidence that shows anybody but David is the perpetrator of these crimes, including the killing of his wife, child, and himself. A simple truth. It really is this simple. Either you believe David Crowley is innocent or you believe he is guilty. If you believe David Crowley is guilty, you are wrong. If you believe David Crowley is innocent, you are right. It really is that simple. A United States Army veteran is dead. His wife and his 5-year-old daughter are dead. A thorough investigation would only conclude with authorities admitting they lacked evidence to support their accusations. If authorities were to admit the case remains unsolved, they would also have to admit that the public may still be in danger. I am not able to solve this case. My interest is in forcing authorities to admit David Crowley is innocent. The reason they refuse to talk about this case is not because they are confident of David's guilt. They lack confidence in their allegations. Their department wishes to move on, but they are only lying to themselves. They must know the simple truth, and they need to publicly admit this. Their credibility depends on it now. The unspoken truth is that David is innocent until proven guilty. Why are authorities running from this simple truth? How long do they think they can run for? You cannot run from God. You cannot run from your nightmares, and you cannot run from the facts. Why would anyone want to? What could possibly motivate someone to try? If you cannot prove David Crowley guilty, then he remains innocent. It's as simple as that. So the resistance we face is disgusting. If David was guilty, the evidence would be right in our faces. If David was guilty, resistance to our questions would not exist. If David was guilty, facts would be evident. There are no facts to prove David guilty. There are only facts which prove David innocent. Hence the resistance to getting justice for David Crowley and family. Who cares? Do the people who closed this case and decided to not speak about it ever again really care? Do the friends who accused David Crowley of being guilty days after his body was found really care? Perhaps they only care about spreading the accusations of David's guilt instead of researching the facts of this case. They don't seem to care about the facts which prove David innocent. Truth is a simple thing. Justice does not die. Facts prove David is innocent.